Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let's Talk About It. Before I get started on this episode, I just want to say thank you. And for those of you who are just tuning in with us, I also have a YouTube channel, which my actually first 3 episodes of this podcast are on. Once I figure out how to transfer those YouTube videos over to the podcast player, I definitely will. But this will be the first episode on the podcast player, and this will be my Godzilla marathon leading up to my eventual review of Godzilla King of Monsters, which I just want to say I loved. I understand there's some people out there that don't like it all that much, but I thought it was great. Also, another thing to note, I am alone today. Rick is very busy and Jonathan is in Germany, so I will be by myself for the next couple days, which is totally fine. Today we're going to be talking about the Godzilla Heisei series, the end of the Godzilla Heisei series, and the Godzilla Millennium series. Now, we're not going to be talking about really any particular movie in general. Sorry, I'm eating dinner. We're going to be talking about the discussion on whether or not Godzilla Jr. from the Heisei series is the same Godzilla in the Millennium series. Now, for those of you who have not seen the Heisei series or the Millennium series, the Heisei series was a series of Godzilla films. These are actually the only Godzilla films that I'm aware of. There might be a couple that were made by Toho that have a main continuity, that have an actual continuity to them. The Heisei series started in 1984 with the return of Godzilla, and ended in 1995 with Godzilla vs. Destroyer. The Millennium series started in 1999 with Godzilla 2000, or Godzilla 2000 Millennium as it's known in Japan, and ended in 2004 with Godzilla Final Wars. So the discussion is Godzilla Jr. from the Heisei series the same Godzilla in the Millennium series? And this is a very interesting question. For those of you who have not seen Godzilla vs. Destroyer, in Godzilla vs. Destroyer, Godzilla's heart is melting down. Whether it's some sort of radiation poison that he has, or he's overloaded with radiation, I can't quite remember. I haven't seen that movie in quite a while. All I can remember is I absolutely loved that movie. Opinions might change on it because I haven't seen it in years. But for this episode, let's say that I love that movie. At the end of that movie, Godzilla does end up dying. Oh, I should also say that Godzilla Jr., almost forgot. Godzilla Jr. goes up against Destroyer, I believe around the middle of the movie, and actually gets killed. This causes Godzilla to get pissed off, kill Destroyer before he dies. So, Godzilla dies at the end of the movie, his heart melts down, and he either transfers his soul into Godzilla Jr., or Godzilla Jr. didn't die and was just unconscious, or Godzilla somehow reincarnates into a different Godzilla. Because at the end of the movie, after Godzilla dies and he melts down, which is actually a really cool scene, but more on that later. Well, actually, I'll just talk about it now. When he melts down, you can see his skeleton, you can see his skin melting off, and you can see his skeleton. It's a really cool scene. Anyways, after he dies, out of the mist, you see Godzilla roaring. Now, a lot of people think that he somehow transferred his soul into his son, and other people think that his son was actually just unconscious. Godzilla Jr. was actually just unconscious and didn't die. So the ending is a little ambiguous onto what actually happened. But the Godzilla 2000, which was actually made in 1999, which is a lot of people like to bring up, which is actually kind of funny, but I understand why they called it Godzilla 2000. Anyways, in Godzilla 2000, we see a new Godzilla. Now, the discussion is that this Godzilla in Godzilla 2000 Millennium is the same as Godzilla Jr. And fans have debated this for years. Unfortunately, the answer to this question, or this debate, is unfortunately a resounding no. It is a resounding no. But nevertheless, it's still fun to talk about because canonically it makes sense. Because what Toho has confirmed, they've confirmed this multiple times, that this is actually a direct sequel to the 1954 Godzilla. This is either... Now, that's what they've said. I don't know the initial statement on it, but when you think about it, if that's the case, then it's basically just trying to reboot the Heisei series, or remake the Heisei series, because at the beginning of the Heisei series was the return of Godzilla in 1984. Now, the Heisei series has a legitimate reason for Godzilla's return. This Godzilla in the Heisei series is actually Godzilla's biological brother, but it never explains if this is the same Godzilla from 1954. For those of you who've not seen the original Godzilla, I'm sorry, Godzilla actually dies at the end of that movie. They kill him with something called the Oxygen Destroyer, which reduces him to a skeleton. So it never explains whether or not this is the same Godzilla, and in this continuity, he somehow survived the Oxygen Destroyer, or if this is a Heisei series situation where this is Godzilla's brother. Now, either way, it doesn't really. If you say it's Godzilla's brother, then it just feels like a rehash of the Heisei series. And if you say it's the same Godzilla, then it completely undermines the message to the original 1954 Godzilla. So this is a fun discussion to be had, because if we, and I should say that this is a movie, so none of this really matters. You can actually say that it's the same Godzilla from the Heisei series, and that can just be what it is, because this is a movie, so who cares? But and that's the beautiful thing about movies, is that they're not real, so you can literally draw up your own conclusions to them. That is the beautiful thing about movies and entertainment. But anyways, if we do say that this is the same Godzilla from the Heisei series, like I said, canonically it makes sense. Because if you think about it, there's been enough time for this Godzilla to mature. We've seen that Godzilla Jr., grows very, very fast. I believe his debut was in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla Part 2, where we see him as a baby, and then the second movie after that was Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, where we see him much, much bigger than he used to be. I believe at this point he's about 100 feet tall. And then in Godzilla vs. Destroyer, he's almost fully matured. So 1995 to 1999 or 2000, whatever time period this movie is set in, that is enough time for Godzilla Jr. to fully mature. Now, another reason why people say that this is the same Godzilla, because Godzilla in the Heisei series is not depicted as Godzilla as we know him today. Godzilla is depicted as a force of nature, neither good nor evil, and is only really, quote-unquote, helps us when our goals somewhat line up with his. A good example of this is actually in my favorite Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, which, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. That movie is amazing. You will be laughing your head off from the beginning to the end. Not that it's a good movie, but it's amazing. Trust me. You'll know what I'm talking about when you watch it. Anyways, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, we see that since our goal is to destroy Space Godzilla, then our goals line up with the lines up with the original Godzilla, and he helps. I keep saying us, but them. He helps them, quote unquote, helps them. Not really helps them, but because we're doing the same thing, of course, because they're doing the same thing, trying to kill Space Godzilla, they, quote unquote, fight together. When in reality, they're just they just have a common enemy. So Godzilla is depicted as a force of nature in the Heisei series. He's also depicted the same way in the Millennium series, except for one movie, which is Godzilla vs. Mothra and Ghidorah, which, if you have never seen that movie, highly recommend it. It's easily one of the best Godzilla movies out there. Anyways, but we're going to be talking about that movie tomorrow. That is a discussion for another day. Anyways, Godzilla is depicted the same way in the Millennium series. He's depicted as a force of nature, neither good nor evil, and helps us out when our goals just happen to line up with his. So there's a good basis for. So now we have a good basis for saying that these two Godzillas are in fact the same Godzillas. That Godzilla Jr. is the same Godzilla from the Godzilla in the Millennium series. So that makes sense. Like I said before, enough time has passed for this Godzilla to fully mature. And another thing that could help establish continuity between the end of the Heisei series and the beginning of the Millennium series is that in the Millennium series, there's a force known as G-Force. G-Force is meant to study and destroy Godzilla if necessary. In Godzilla 2000 Millennium, there are two people, I cannot remember their names for the life of me. I am sorry to Godzilla fans out there. Now, I should say this, before I go any further in this video, if I forget names, or if I don't know which movie certain characters were in, it's because I'm not a massive Godzilla fan. Jonathan is the massive Godzilla fan, but I'm enough of a fan to know certain things about Godzilla, to understand what Godzilla's all about. I've seen enough movies, I do consider myself a fan, but I'm not a massive fan. I'm not a massive fan like I would be to Halo or Star Wars. Those are my two favorite mediums. For those of you who watched the podcast or listened to the podcast on YouTube, you know that. For those of you who haven't, again, there's I also have a YouTube channel of the same name, and my two previous videos, or I guess three previous videos, are on there. Anyways, back to the video, back to the podcast. Where was I? Oh yes, the Millennium. Anyways, I'm not a major fan. So, anyways, there is a group, or at least about 3 people in the Millennium series, that they're kind of like storm chasers, but instead of chasing tornadoes, they're chasing Godzilla. Basically, they predict Godzilla's movements, and they follow around to see where he might go next, or to see what his next move is, or to see if he's going to attack Japan or not anytime soon. So you could easily say at the end of the Heisei series that this G-Force was sort of dissolved and forgotten about, and turned into this storm chaser group with these two, and these two people now run it. So that is a better way to also establish continuity between the Heisei series and the Millennium series, and further cement that Godzilla, that this Godzilla is in fact Godzilla Jr. And also, I should say this, the designs to Godzilla Jr. and the designs to the Godzilla in the Millennium series, well, they are a little bit different, are very, very similar. They have a very similar snout. They have a very similar arm length and reach, and they have a very similar structure. Now, obviously, Godzilla Jr. was made to look like Godzilla from the Heisei series, but at the end of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, or at least Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, when we see Godzilla Jr., he does look very, very similar to the Millennium series design. The Millennium series design is actually my favorite design. If you don't know what that looks like, you can look up pictures of it. It's actually a really, really good design. It's easily my favorite. Anyways, so you could further cement continuity through that, saying that this group that goes around and chases Godzilla is the same, is G-Force, just not as they're no longer funded by the military. You could easily say that they somehow got departed from the military, or got dissolved from the military, or something. But you could easily further establish a continuity with that and say that these two Godzillas are in fact the same Godzilla. Also, Godzilla is depicted this. I believe I already mentioned this, but if I haven't, I'll say it again. Godzilla is depicted the same way in the Millennium series. I already did say this, but yeah, he's depicted in the same way in the Millennium series that he is in the Heisei series. I believe I already said that. Sorry, no one's here with me, so there's no one to tell me, David, you already said that. You already brought this up. The struggle of doing podcasts by yourself, everybody. Anyways, so it's a very, very interesting discussion to have on this subject. To say that these Godzillas are in fact the same Godzillas. Now, unfortunately, Toho has confirmed that they're not, but again, the beauty of entertainment is none of this is real, so you can easily draw up your own conclusion to it. And say that these are in fact the same Godzillas. And it does feel like at one point they definitely considered it, because all the strong connections that it has to the Heisei series. Now, obviously, they're just reusing. Obviously, they're reusing ideas that worked for them in the Heisei series. Uh, video movie producers do that all the time. Movie companies do that all the time. They'll recycle ideas that worked for them, and as a whole, the Heisei series really worked for. As a whole, the Heisei series really worked for Toho, because it's the only series that has an established continuity. Every movie is a sequel. The Godzilla movies, to me, have more or less always felt like a not a mythology, an anthology series, where every movie is different from the last. Now, obviously, this is due to because for a long time the Godzilla movies did underperform, and they had to keep rebooting it until they could get a firm set on the movies. But the Heisei series is a very different series because every movie did pretty well in terms of box office revenue. Every movie did well enough to warrant a sequel, and I believe there are 7 movies in the Heisei series. And to say that the Millennium series builds off of the Heisei series, I believe would have been a great way to kind of continue that series, because the ending of, like I said, the ending of Godzilla vs. Destroya, we see Godzilla Jr. come back to life. So it's kind of weird that it's not set in the same continuity, but it definitely feels like at one point it was meant to be set in the same continuity. As there are similar ideas used, as the designs to Godzilla are very similar, and also it picked up just a couple years after the end of the Heisei series. Now, I will say this: this is an important thing to remember, that Godzilla 2000 is very noticeably a direct response to the 1998 TriStar film Zilla, made by Roland Emmerich. Which, if you haven't seen it, movie's terrible. I mean, the movie is awful. There's a reason why Toho bought back the rights and named that movie Zilla. I believe if you go on Netflix and look for it, I believe the name of it is Zilla. I could be wrong on that. It could still be called Godzilla, but I believe, like, if you were to go on Netflix and search up that movie, the title would now be Zilla. I believe it is Zilla now, but nevertheless, that's what that monster has been dubbed. And Godzilla 2000 is very noticeably a direct response to that movie, to remind audiences who the true Godzilla is. And that's what the Millennium series was kind of made for. Now, unfortunately, the Millennium series never found its footing. So I guess it's kind of a good thing that it's not connected to the Heisei series, because, well, a lot of Godzilla fans don't like the Heisei series particularly, which is kind of weird, because it is one of my favorites. While I'm not the biggest fan of Godzilla, all the Heisei films are really solid. I believe the Heisei films consist of The Return of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Godzilla vs. Mecha King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mecha Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Mecha Godzilla 2. No, I'm completely wrong. I forgot Godzilla. I always forget Godzilla vs. Biollante. So it's Godzilla versus, the Heisei series is Return of Godzilla, Godzilla versus Biollante, the Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mothra, which I believe Mecha King Ghidorah is in. I can't remember if he gets his own film or not, but I believe Mecha King Ghidorah is in Godzilla vs. Mothra. He might be in Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, but I'm not 100% certain. I haven't seen these films in a very long time. I have only just recently watched Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, because that movie is amazing. Again, I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, you will be laughing the entire time you watch it because of how ridiculous it is. Anyways, so Godzilla vs. Mothra, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and Godzilla vs. Destroya. I believe it's 7 films. I believe I got those right. If I got them out of order, I apologize to all the Godzilla fans out there. Again, I'm not the biggest fan in the world. I just know enough about him to name off some movies that he's been in. and to name off the different series: the Showa series, the Heisei series, and the Millennium series. Anyways, so I guess it's a good thing that they didn't make this a direct sequel. They didn't make the Millennium series a direct sequel to the Heisei series, because unfortunately, like I said, the Millennium series didn't do too very well. Godzilla 2000 underperformed at the box office, and the next movie that they made after that was Godzilla versus Mega something. I can't remember the name, but it's a firefly creature that he goes off against, which is again underperformed at the box office. And then the movie that came out after that, which we'll actually talk about tomorrow, is Godzilla versus Mothra and King Ghidorah, which is the weirdest, most interesting concept to a Godzilla movie I have ever come across. And when I was a kid, that movie scared the ever living crap out of me because of the explanation for Godzilla in that movie. But nevertheless, it is a very, very interesting Godzilla movie. It's also very, very good. And this movie actually grossed enough to not necessarily not necessarily make a sequel, but it made enough money to where they could continue the Millennium series. The movie after that was Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which again underperformed. They let Godzilla go into a rest, but 2004 was the 50th birthday of Godzilla, so they made Godzilla Final Wars, which I will be talking about the day before me and Jonathan do our review on Godzilla vs. King of Monsters, because that movie, again, that's another Godzilla movie to where if you haven't seen it, you absolutely need to see it. That movie is insane. It's mad. It's crazy. It is like if every kung fu movie in existence, Godzilla, Star Wars, The Matrix, and just a tad bit of I'm blanking out on the name here. Star Trek. Just a tad bit of Star Trek all had a massive orgy and had a baby out of that orgy. This would be the product of that orgy. This would be the baby of that orgy. It is insane, but it is amazing. And if you have not seen it, highly recommend it. It is crazy, crazy, crazy. It's not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it is so much fun. Again, it's a lot like Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. It is a lot of fun. It is just it will make you smile ear to ear the entire time you watch it. But after that, the Godzilla was actually put on a hiatus for a long, long time, and then they rebooted the franchise with obviously the 2014 Godzilla, made by Legendary, which is, it's not my favorite movie, but it is very good. And also the movie that just came out, King of Monsters. And then, of course, Toho came out with their Shin Gojira, which I've seen bits and pieces of. It's a little weird for a Godzilla. It's definitely a very different take on Godzilla. It is a reboot of it is a straight up reboot, a retelling of the 1954 Godzilla, or Gojira, as it's known in Japan. And fun fact, that movie's actually called in Japan. That literal name of the movie is Shin Gojira, not Shin Godzilla. It's Gojira, which is a nice little touch. Anyways, I've never fully seen that movie, but I've seen bits and pieces, and it's a little strange for a god. It is very much a retelling of that character. If you've never seen it, it is seeing that character in a brand new light. And again, this time Godzilla is pure evil, going out of his way to destroy the city. So it's a little odd. But nevertheless, I believe that's all I really have for this video. So the discussion on whether or not Godzilla Jr. is the same Godzilla in the Millennium series is an unfortunate no, but it's still a fun thing to discuss, as it does line up very, 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 very well with the continuity that it already has in place. Again, it's probably for the best that they didn't continue that series because because the Millennium series didn't do too well. So it's probably for the best. But anyways, that is the video for today. I expected this video to be a little bit longer, but since I don't have anybody with me, it's kind of hard to talk for about an hour. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. I will make a new video. A new video is coming out tomorrow. I will be discussing Godzilla versus Mothra versus Ghidorah, which is the most interesting Godzilla movie that has ever come out. And then after that, I will be talking about Space Godzilla, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and then I will be talking about Godzilla Final Wars. If not Godzilla Final Wars, then probably, I'll probably talk about the 2014 Godzilla, and then I'll talk about Godzilla Final Wars. I'll talk about and then I'll talk about my personal favorite Godzilla movies. We'll probably discuss that while we're talking about King of Monsters, our personal favorite Godzilla movies. Yeah, so that's the schedule for videos to come out. Again, thank you all so much for listening. You all have a great week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.